This episode is brought to you by 3 books. Number 1, Happiness from the Inside Out. Number 2, Love from the Inside Out. And then, as always, Conversations, How to Manage Your Business Relationships One Conversation at a Time by yours truly, Ivan Farber. All 3 books are available on Amazon and Kindle. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Conversations About Conversations. On today's show, we're going to discuss one of the most important conversations that there is: happiness. Your happiness, my happiness, all of our happiness, how to be happy. My guest is the happiness coach, Robert Mack. Robert is one of the most exciting, engaging, and extraordinary coaches and speakers in the world today, especially in the field of happiness. He is a positive psychology expert with a master's degree from the University of Pennsylvania in their Master's in Applied Positive Psychology program, which is world-renowned. He's the author of 2 books that I mentioned: Happiness from the Inside Out, The Art and Science of Fulfillment, and Love from the Inside Out, Lessons and Inspiration for Loving Yourself, Your Life, and Each Other, and a number of books that he hasn't published yet. He's a repeat guest of the show, and I'm delighted to call him a friend and someone who's made a difference in my life. My goal isn't to repeat the conversation we had previously on the episode from earlier this year. I will include in the show notes a link to the episode called Happiness Leads to Success. But this is Happiness Part 2. And please help me welcome back to Conversations About Conversations, Robert Mack. Robert, welcome back.
I am so excited to be back. Thanks for having me.
I want to give you an opportunity to make an opening statement. Would you?
Yeah, sure. First, I'm just so grateful to be here, Ivan. I love and appreciate you and your work so much. Every time we connect, we have the most fantastic conversations. So I'm looking forward to that. I think it's the most important part for me right now. It's just I'm grateful to be here. I'm grateful to be in conversation with you.
I'm grateful as well. I have a phrase that I like, that I am grateful and full of greatness.
That's awesome. I love that. And, I'm a wordsmith and sort of a connoisseur of language and vocabulary. So any little turns of phrases like that are so easy for me to remember. And that's a beautiful one right there.
I want to use a framework for this conversation. And the framework is right from your book, The 8 Ways to Be Happier, Starting Right Now. And what I'm going to start with is by reading off the 8 principles, and then one by one, go through them, unpack them at the risk of overusing a cliche metaphor, but go through them, touch them, be with them, and see what comes out. So here are the 8 ways from your book. Number 1, the principle of smart energy investment. Number 2, the principle of non-attachment. Number 3, the principle of positive focus. Number 4, the principle of self-appreciation. Number 5, the principle of appreciative thought and language. Number 6, the principle of constructive response to adversity. Number 7, the principle of inspired action. And number 8, the principle of self-empowerment in relationships.
Love it.
So those are your 8 principles. And what does it feel like when I read them the way I just read them?
It, in one hand, is extraordinarily validating. On the other, it's refreshing. And by refreshing, I mean, you're refreshing my memory. You write something and you make such a big a deal about it when you're writing it, and it is a big deal. And then later you move on to different ways of thinking about things and talking about things. And they are just as true now as they've ever been. And at the same time, I probably use different language, just different ways of talking about it. Hopefully the language is just as clear and just as clean. But yeah, I'm such appreciation for that book and for you sharing those 8 principles. Not the least of which is I now remember them.
Well, and you wrote it a long time ago at this point.
Yeah.
It
Oh,
wasn't
yeah.
recent.
No, it was over probably 14 years ago or so. Yeah.
So the principle of smart energy investment, tell us what that is.
It's lazy intelligence. So it's taking the laziest but smartest approach or path to getting what you most want. Most of us source our happiness, our peace, our love, our self-love through other people, places, things, and activities. But the encouragement and happiness from the inside out, the encouragement from me is to go straight to the source for what you want. So instead of needing your happiness to be fed through middle people and middle things and middle activities, you just go directly to the source for it, which is within yourself. It's always within yourself. That's what that really is ultimately about when it comes to happiness. But it means cutting out all of the extraneous, non-essential stuff in your life so that you can get what you most want and get it most quickly, easily, effectively, and enjoyably.
So the direct path, the path of least resistance, the path is the way, no matter what the path is. The word, though, that sticks out to me is the word lazy.
Yeah.
Because the word lazy can have negative connotations. How do you mean the word lazy?
Yes, I choose that word intentionally because I, like so many folks who struggle with happiness, was wired or felt wired for taking the most effortful path possible to get what I wanted. This flawed premise that happiness only came through hard work. It's not entirely untrue, but I would say that it's not the deepest truth. So by lazy, I simply mean the most efficient and effective and, dare I say, enjoyable path. The more enjoyable, the less effortful it often feels, the less work it often seems to require. But that doesn't mean it's not an investment of energy, right? And so I'm just wanting to encourage folks to increasingly reach for or allow for the possibility that happiness is easier than easy, that it's something that you experience and enjoy, not because you achieve, accomplish, or acquire it, but because you simply accept and acknowledge it, right? It's something that exists already, and that we've made hard work out of happiness, when the truth is it's a lot harder work to remain unhappy because happiness is your true nature. It's your original face. It's your Christ mind, your Buddha mind. We made hard work of experiencing and enjoying that. And we've made easy work of doing the hard thing, which is being unhappy. So the lazy phrase there is just an invitation for folks to realize and recognize that happiness is closer to you than your own breathing, nearer to you than your own hands and feet, that it's something that exists and that you can tap into, tune into, turn on to, and really just recognize you're always tapped in, tuned in, and turned on to through something that feels more like relaxation than you can through something that feels like achievement, accomplishment, and acquisition.
Relax your way into happiness. Let it happen, because too often, and I'm speaking about myself for myself, I've efforted to be successful in order that I could be happy. I've been a victim. Oh, I haven't done enough to be happy someday. I've been a martyr. Like all of those things that are normally associated with success. Like we always talk about in our society, hard work will lead you to success, and then success will lead you to happiness. Your take on it is very refreshing. And one thing I got out of the chapter and the idea of smart energy investment is looking at a return on your investment. So actually kind of as the businessman in me, thinking of it that way. And you don't say this directly, but there's a principle from economics that you write about. The principle is diminishing marginal utility.
Right.
And I love the concept of happiness islands, happiness deserts, and the idea that as you're getting a good return on your smart energy investment, at a certain point in time, it will diminish. You still may be getting more, but it's diminishing. And that's how you know to stop. Just like in our capitalist society, that's the pricing mechanism.
Yes, that's right. You get less and less happiness bang for your buck, right? Literally and figuratively. You hit a tipping point where more money doesn't get you more happiness. And I'd argue that even when we measure happiness, what we think we're measuring is happiness is actually maybe quality of life. Um, it's not happiness. Happiness is something that's deeper, that's all pervasive. It's more fulfilling. But in any case, the idea there, at least from a scientific perspective, is that you can only squeeze so much happiness out of success, right? And if you look real closely and you look at all the studies, you'll find that you actually squeeze very little happiness out of success. You might squeeze a little bit of pleasure out of success. And you can squeeze out a lot of quality of life out of success. But you don't ultimately end up squeezing much or any happiness out of success. And that's why success doesn't lead to happiness. You know, if that was the case, then we'd see all these rich, famous people being extraordinarily happy instead of being extraordinarily unhappy and depressed and suicidal. And that's not all of them, of course. And then the additional piece there, to your point, is not only that success doesn't lead to happiness, but happiness does lead to success, right? And I'd argue happiness is the greatest success. It's the reason you want success. So then again, we come back again to this point, which is like, if you're trying to route your happiness through success or money or health or kids or family, you're not wrong, but there might be a much more direct, much more efficient, effective, and enjoyable path for you. One where you don't have to wait into the future or wait until somebody or something else changes before you feel happy.
Because happiness is right now.
And here.
And here.
That's right.
Within us, all around us, within everyone. Your point, though, is very well received by me as someone who is one of the most successful people that I know and one of the least happy. Other people don't necessarily know that because they see the successful guy that looks happy. And it's not like I don't have a great life. I like to smile. And I don't like people to see that I'm unhappy. And most of the unhappiness is a quiet inside by myself suffering on my own. But your book is my new manual, my framework for being happy. Like, it is the textbook for happiness, at least of all the books I found. I don't know of any book else like it. And the principle of smart energy investment is the first principle. Now, the second, did you want to add something on that?
Just that I get shivers throughout my whole body, Ivan, because you consistently say things in a way that hits me at a level that no one else does. I wrote that book because I felt precisely the way you felt to describe feeling most of my life. I mean, that's the reason I wrote the book. It wasn't like I'm going to become an author. In fact, I was quite sure nobody's going to buy this book. Nobody cares about this book, but I cared. I wanted to be helpful and I wanted to clarify my own thoughts. And I also, more than anything else, it was a selfish attempt to commit myself to clarifying the principles that were working for me and to commit to continuing to practice them, right? So when I hear you say what you say, it just resonates so deeply. It's a visceral, palpable response I feel inside because it speaks to a truth deep within me. So thank you for sharing that. That means the world to me, really.
Well, I like frameworks and constructs. And I admitted to you before I officially kicked off the episode that although I read it once after our first conversation and I liked it and I felt good about it, it wasn't until I read it a second time and I'm now underlining and actually taking notes from the book, and I have it in a Google Doc. And wait, there's more. I will record some of it in my own voice and play them as affirmations for myself. I do a lot of that already, thanks to one of my guests from a year and a half ago named Dr. Shad Helmstetter, who wrote a book called What to Say When You Talk to Yourself. So I listen to positive self-talk every day. But as I'm writing through some of this stuff, I'm going to add it to my affirmations. The 8 principles, just they're going to become part of me as a reminder, as a presence. So yeah, we're very connected.
Absolutely. The affirmations, by the way, the audible or audio version of those affirmations, that's brilliant. I love that.
I record it, I upload it to Google Drive, and then I just click on it. It's playing in my ears. I swipe through the different affirmations. I've lost 30 pounds because of the eating affirmation.
What? That's fantastic.
Yeah, I didn't set out to lose weight, but I had heard Dr. Shad Helmstetter said when he started doing what he was doing about 30 years ago, he lost 38 pounds and he never gained it back. And I took his affirmation, I read it, and I listened to it again and again. And it plugs into how I'm wired. Like one of the things he says in the affirmation is mealtime is achievement time. And unfortunately, because I've been so addicted to achievement and it's never been enough, and the achievement has all been to try to get happiness, of which it never led to happiness, but it still sinks into the hardwiring in me. But other things like less food on your fork is less food on your waist, and less food on your plate is less food on your waist. And just listen to those mantras and it works.
I love that. And they're pithy, punchy little statements you've got there, those affirmations. They're sticky. Love.
Have you recorded any affirmations for yourself or for others?
Yeah, I used to. That was a practice I definitely participated in for a long time. I actually started because I had trouble listening to my own voice because that was my own little insecurity. I would listen to lots of other people's affirmations. I would try to find the ones that resonated with me. I remember listening to, Abraham Hicks a lot. They didn't always just share affirmations, but then through Abraham Hicks, I found Louise Hay. Louise Hay was like the godmother of affirmations, and she had this very grandmotherly voice, and it was so nurturing. And then at some point, I did record my own, and I practiced that for a while. It also, by the way, helped me get over this insecurity around listening to my own voice, which was a beautiful little side effect. But yeah, I love what you're saying there, and it is important. I think can be useful if it resonates with you to record them in your own voice.
I would like to send you a link to 1 or 2 of my favorite ones, and then you can just listen to it as you're working out or walking around or whatever. And I'll be curious to get your feedback on it.
Please send it to me. I know I'm going to love it. I'm going to love it. So I'll preface it with that. But yes, please, I'm always open to receiving any and every form of abundance.
And it is really interesting the relationship we have with our own voice and our own self-image and our own image in the mirror and how we show up on pictures. And these are all things that are in the way of us having high self-esteem. One of the images I thought of just this morning as I was preparing for this and wanting to use the principle of smart energy and actually some of the other principles of self-appreciation. And I decided this morning that I would put myself up on my own pedestal. Like high self-esteem meant like visually, but also body language, putting myself up, putting my esteem up in the air above me. In the shower this morning, I'm like, okay, wait a minute. What, you're not putting yourself down, put yourself up above yourself. So it's just interesting when I heard you say, yeah, listening to your own voice, you're not alone. I would say most people, but I think it's just into that attachment to how we should look or sound or whatever it is.
Beautiful. Absolutely agreed. I love that you get this download, Ivan. And this is the beautiful thing, I think, about life and about just tuning this sort of radio station that is our attention. Because when you sort of tune to a different channel, you start hearing different things, you start seeing different things, you start experiencing different things. And at first it doesn't seem like that big a deal. But what you just shared there is so powerful and so profound, right? And the interesting thing about it is there was a time when, I was struggling with this whole like selective attention thing, like selective perception thing, like just trying to focus in ways that were more constructive and productive and profitable. And I read a book called The Handbook of Mental Control. Really struggling. And the Handbook of Mental Control is hundreds of studies about what does and doesn't work with respect to controlling your focus and thinking what you want to think, essentially. And the one thing the book, one of the many things the book shared was that we mostly think in pictures, but we verbalize it so quickly and we put words and language around it so quickly that it's almost invisible to us that we think mostly in pictures. And especially when you worry, it's mostly pictures. So one of the best antidotes to fear or worry or uncertainty or insecurity is coming up with different or better or more constructive mental pictures, imagery. You did that so beautifully right there without having to read any more books about it. It just came to you naturally. Something that I didn't, of course, think too much about, but you just did it. So anyway, that's part of the many benefits that I think accrue to us when we dial our radio station or tune ourselves to a different frequency, because we start to see and experience and hear downloads and insights that we might not otherwise hear, that only help us do more of what we're trying to do or feel more of what we're trying to feel.
Yeah. And the context where that download came from was spending the last several days, with your book. And that's where it came from, was thinking in my mind, okay, of the 8 principles, what do I need to do right now? I need to think positively. I need to appreciate myself. I need appreciative thought and language. That's what gave me the image of putting myself up on a pedestal. The second principle is the principle of non-attachment. I'd like to hear what you mean by that.
Yeah. So sometimes when I would read books written by happy people or books written about happiness, I would hear a principle of non-attachment. And often it would sound like giving up your goals, desires, and dreams. It does not mean that, not in the least. All right. So if you have desires and dreams and goals, please continue going for your goals and your dreams and your desires. It doesn't mean giving up goals, dreams, and desires. It simply means giving up the struggle and the stress and the strain and the strife around your goals and desires. In other words, it means letting go or detaching from or not being attached to this idea that your happiness depends on your goals, desires, or dreams coming true or being realized or being fulfilled. So in other words, instead of attaching your happiness to what does or doesn't happen, you want to attach your happiness to simply you. Just let it be and rest and depend and be contingent on only what you think and do. Because that's the truth. The truth is it doesn't depend on what does and doesn't happen outside of you. It depends on what does and doesn't happen inside of you. So the invitation there is, again, not to give up what you want. Want what you want. Just don't attach your happiness to getting what you want or having what you want. If you can do that, not only will you feel better, but as a result of feeling better, you do better. And you also tend to find that you get what you want a lot more quickly, a lot more easily, and a lot more enjoyably. So now the journey is enjoyable and the destination is enjoyable. The journey is something you experience and you have a ton of fun with, and you're happy during the work that you're putting in, or during you're reaching for the goal, or you're during your attempt to carve out this dream for yourself. But you also get there faster, whatever your destination is. And then when you get there, you also find you can enjoy the destination or the dream or desire so much more, which is often not what extraordinarily successful and overachieving and ambitious people experience or do. They're usually pretty unhappy, desperate, needy, greedy during the process of it. Then if they're lucky enough to make it happen, sometimes they often do, they're not happy when they get it. And then before long, something else replaces it. And now they've got a whole new goal, dream, and desire to chase after. And so this journey called life mostly ends up being stress and struggle and strain and strife.
I'd win an award at work. And what did I want? Another award. And then I win another award at work. And what did I want? Another one and another one and another one. Always thinking about the next one was going to make me happy. And if I was happy, it was just for that instant. And it was the leading up to the getting it that there was this moment of happiness, and being non-attached or giving up attachment to that, it certainly makes me happier, because otherwise there's the unhappiness of not getting. And much like when you get a lot of presents on Christmas, you have all these presents and it's hard to really let them in, take them in and value them, because there's too much abundance. Well, I guess in that vein, you can have too much success. Like, you have all the success around you, but you don't appreciate it. And then you are attaching your success to your happiness, and it just doesn't work well when you do that.
You said so much there. My gosh, we can unpack that for hours upon hours. I mean, you're absolutely right about that. And this is something that I didn't share in the book quite this way. It's there, but it's not written this way. Happiness, you can call it fulfillment, you can call it contentment, use any word you want. Sometimes the word happiness doesn't resonate with people as deeply as other words, but I'll call it happiness for now. Happiness seems to be something that we experience when we realize our desire or fulfill a dream or reach a goal. But it's not the fulfilling of a desire that eventuates in happiness. It's actually ultimately the forgetting of desire, the forgetting of the dream, or even the goal for a little short period of time. That forgetting is blissful. That's why at night you can have the most difficult day, but when you get into bed and you slip off to sleep and you forget the world, you forget your desires and your goals and your dreams and even your fears, you feel so blissful. You feel so happy. And so that right there is evidence and proof that the fulfillment you're seeking through other people, places, things, and activities, through success, through a desire, goal, or dream, you actually have inside of you all along. And the desire or the goal or the dream, as beautiful as it may be, is often a distraction from this fulfillment that exists inside you all the time. You actually are overlooking that the fulfillment that exists inside of you to go chasing it through or by trying to realize this dream or trying to fulfill this goal or achieve something else in your life, right? And so it's just, think about that for a second. It can be a little hard to get your head around that. But the idea is that we often go chasing things, not because we want those things so much, but because we want happiness. And the reason we're able to chase those things in search of happiness is because we've overlooked the happiness that is right here and now, right? So another way to put it is, you said this, gosh, you said this, Ivan, so well, which is, we think we're in it for the presence, presents, but we're actually in it for the presence, presence, right? So we think we're in it for the good stuff, for the presents, for the gifts, but we are actually in it just for the happiness and the fulfillment that exists in this moment, always and forever.
While you were sharing that, I was thinking about a situation that you're uncomfortable in for whatever reason. And then, as you mentioned, the falling asleep, and you're like, oh, I can relax now. What was it about the mechanism that at that moment you could relax, that you didn't have access to it when you were in that stressful moment? Like, if you really had that, why do you not always have it? And I don't know that you can always have it unless you're really, really being present and saying, wait a minute, I'm off, come back to presence. I'm off, come back to presence, practice the principles. But yes, I think we have that power in us to leave whatever circumstances and follow the principle of non-attachment. Much easier said than done, but something that could be developed.
Yes. And also sometimes easier done than said. In other words, we're doing it all the time, and sometimes we recognize it and sometimes we don't. That's all. In fact, I'd argue that more often than not, you're doing it. If you're feeling any positive emotion at all, peace, love, joy, excitement, you're already doing it. You're already doing it, right? So, and you do it every night, by the way, for 5, 6, 7 hours as you sleep. You often do it when, you're too tired to move a whole lot. You often do it when you're in, strangely enough, even when you're in severe pain, your body's in pain. But at that point in time, often, not always, but your mind not suffering so much. That suffering is what we call unhappiness often. So yes, I've been absolutely, it's something that you want to, that you can cultivate and practice. Ultimately, of course, you'll discover that happiness is something that you can't cultivate, that you don't need to cultivate, and that you don't need to practice because it's a non-practice. It's like sitting, right? Sitting isn't something that you need to practice unless you've spent your whole life standing up. Sitting is a relaxing of effort, not more effort. And happiness is a relaxing of effort, ultimately, not more effort. But in the beginning, because you've been squeezing those fists so tight for so long, it feels so effortful. It feels like it takes so much work, this relaxation thing. But I promise as you continue doing it, it gets easier and easier. And then one day it becomes much harder to be unhappy for very long than it does to be happy.
Well, I have the playbook now. And as you point out in the book, these principles build on each other. So we've got the principle of smart energy, the principle of non-attachment, and then the principle of positive focus, which we were basically just touching on, which is drawing back your positive attention. As you put in the book, give your conscious attention to the better feeling aspects of all experience. And because I have the author here that I can ask, number one, I want to ask you to talk about this principle in general. But number two, I think you very deliberately left off the S at the end of experience. And so I wanted to ask that as a two-part question.
Yeah. So, yes. So focusing on the best feeling aspects. If you'll notice, there is no such thing as a perfect place or person or activity. No matter what it is in life, it seems that we exist in a world of duality. At least it seems that way. And so there's two ends to every stick. Seems like there's a bad end, seems like there's a good end. There's left, there's right, there's up, there's down, right? So that means that no matter what you're going through in your life, there's something about it that you probably don't love or like entirely. And there's something about it that you also do prefer or like or love. And so the invitation there is to focus on the positive end of the stick, the better feeling end of the stick, that part of that person, place, thing, or activity that you feel better for when you're focusing on. So, for instance, and I think I may have used this example before, but plenty of times in my life I've been broke, I've had no money, and that doesn't feel so great. What does feel great, however, is knowing that you can only go up from there, right? And this starts to get into this other principle sort of around the conversational piece of it. But the idea is in every situation that you're in, every environment, wherever you stand or sit or lay down, look for, focus on, think about, and ultimately talk about only the best within that person, place, thing, or activity. And you want to continue practicing that until it becomes a habit, until it becomes automatic. That's the first part of the question. The second part of the question, you might have to repeat to me because I don't know if I caught it all.
So the word at the end of the sentence, give your conscious attention to the better feeling aspects of all experience versus all experiences.
Yes. Yeah. So the better feeling aspect of all experience, I would say, for me at least, is happiness itself, right? So that one experience, this is where language becomes, when we're talking about any of this stuff, particularly things that are ineffable, everything we say is a concession to language, right? So everything's a pointer, nothing's actually it. So you want to be careful. I want to be careful that when I'm pointing the moon, I don't necessarily take the finger for the moon. It's like, look where the finger's pointing, not where the finger is. So in that respect, I'd say, yeah, the one thing that I feel deeply about, and it's funny and ironic that I would say this, considering that I was always on the other side of the fence most of my life, is that happiness, what we might call peaceful aliveness, what we might call the experience of life itself, aliveness is life itself. Life is not only we might call consciousness, not only in everything, it ultimately is everything. Everything consists really of consciousness. And we could talk about it in lots of different ways, but if we talked about physics, for instance, we could say, all right, there's matter and then there's energy. But actually, when you look more deeply, we know there's only energy. And if you look more deeply into that, you realize there's mostly only space, that all matter is essentially energy and all energy essentially is mostly space. And so life is much like that. It looks like there are conditions and circumstances and other people and places in your life. Ultimately, all of that is what we might call consciousness. And that consciousness is mostly emptiness. And that emptiness is what I would call happiness. That emptiness is what I might call it's a fullness. It's a full emptiness, which is a strange thing to say. But the idea is that happiness pervades everything and everyone no matter who or what that thing is or that person is. That's a hard thing to kind of hear. It sounds so abstract, almost very esoteric. And it's something that you have to feel your way into. No need to get your head around it today. But the idea essentially is that there's only one experience ever happening. There's happiness, and then there's your lack of awareness of that. There's abundance in your lack of awareness of that. There's peace in your lack of awareness of that. And so when you overlook peace, we call it conflict or stress or anxiety. When you overlook happiness, you call it unhappiness or depression or any of these other things. But there's only the experience that's ultimately happening. And then there's the overlooking of that experience, which we call the opposite of that experience. And so, yeah, it's a little bit, I occasionally try to do these things where I write these sentences, and Ivan, you're really good about picking up on these things, where I'm trying to say something more deeply, but I don't want to go fully into it because it might just confuse people. But the people that are there already will get it. And yeah, hopefully I elucidated that in a way that was meaningful, Ivan, and it didn't draw you into more murkiness.
It drew me into space. It drew me into the final frontier. It drew me in a lot of good ways. One of the best things about being a podcaster and being someone who produces and edits his own work is we're having this conversation now, but I'm going to have it multiple times as I go through it. And there's things that you said in the last conversation that still hit me. And I'm like, wait, I've heard Rob say that. Well, yeah, I heard him say it. I made the little clip of what you said. And this is an answer that is going to move with me and through me.
Yeah, I love you saying that. That's how I've always felt too. And what's funny is I definitely experience every conversation I experience that with you. You'll say these things, and then I think, oh wow, that's so. When I hear it the second time, I'm like, it goes deeper. Then the third time, it goes even deeper, right? And we find that with ourselves sometimes too. Something comes out, especially if you're just tapped in. I mean, the one intention I try to set at the beginning of every conversation, particularly conversations like this, is that I can get out of the way, and whatever it is that life or the universe, God, whatever you want to call it, wants to say through me, that I allow for that to come through. And so sometimes I listen to something else I've said, and I'm like, well, I don't even remember saying that. And that's fascinating. I'm not sure I even understand that. Let me go back and see if I'm just talking gibberish or if it came from somewhere else. So I love you saying that. And in the East, they say existence, consciousness, bliss, all synonymous is what they say. And I'm saying essentially the same thing here. I'm just trying to use different language for those of us who might not be as familiar with some of the Eastern spiritual traditions.
Now, these 8 principles build on each other like a staircase. And I'm going to ask for a subtle difference or subtle distinguishing the third from fourth. So the third is principle of positive focus, and the fourth is principle of self-appreciation. And to me, they're pretty connected, but why do you have them as separate?
Yeah, so I realized I was getting pretty good at something, which was focusing, call it in a positive way, constructive way, even better, on other people, places, and things. And I really struggled to turn that positive focus and attention, or that constructive focus and attention, back on myself. And so I felt deeply that it deserved its own chapter. At the very least, it probably deserves its own book. I think, in fact, thousands of books have been written specifically and only about that. Ultimately, at the end of the day, you'll find that they're very similar. And if we were going to deep enough into any mystical tradition, we essentially find that there is only one self. And so when you're seeing the positive out there in the world, you're also experiencing the positive inside yourself, right? So it's one and the same. Beyond that, I think most of us struggle with this self-appreciation bit. And usually there's a correlation. When you judge yourself, you tend to automatically judge other people. And when you stop judging yourself, you tend to automatically stop judging other people, right? So that's just a natural sort of outcome generally of doing the work. But sometimes, you need to be reminded of that, if you do it the other way, you stop judging other people. We love that. You might still not have solved this stopping judging yourself thing. So anyway, they both deserve, I think, their own chapter. It's essentially the same theme, but one is sort of turned outwards and one is turned inwards. But the idea is focus on the best feeling aspects of yourself to the exclusion of everything that you don't like or love or can't accept about yourself. And if you do it long enough, I promise, even though it feels like you're burying your head in the sand, when you focus long enough on what you do love and appreciate about yourself genuinely, even if it's one thing, when you turn back to look at those things that you thought you didn't like, you didn't love, and you couldn't accept, suddenly you do like and love them and you do accept them. It's mind blowing. It's like a miracle of all miracles. And so this does require putting aside for a little while, at least, this idea of self improvement. We tend to think that self improvement leads to self acceptance, that it leads to self love. It doesn't. We've all tried that game. It's like chasing the horizon. You just never, ever catch the horizon. And so you want to turn that sort of cart and horse around, prioritize self acceptance, self love, self appreciation, first and foremost, and then trust and know that whatever changes or improvements you need to make in your life will come a lot more easily and enjoyably, and often even unconsciously when you focus on self love first.
Well, I love 3, 4, and 5. I should say I love all 8 principles, but I love 3, 4, and 5 as a group because principle of positive focus tells me, okay, focus my attention on the positive. Then the principle of self-appreciation is, well, don't forget about you. Like you're part of focusing on the positive. And then the 5th principle, the principle of appreciative thought and language. And then as we've distinguished here, also imagery, pictures, maybe metaphors, like different ways to sink into it outside of thought and language. But these 3 principles, as kind of the middle of the 8, they go together and yet they deserve their special focus. Is there anything from your perspective about the principle of appreciative thought and language that you want to highlight here?
Yes, I would say, so that's all about telling a better feeling story based in truth, right? And it's how you talk to yourself and it's how you talk to others. That's what that chapter is all about. And the idea there is it has to be or feel true. If it feels true, it'll be believable. If it feels believable, then you're moving in the right direction. If you try to make it a snow job, so often we try to tell ourselves these things that we know aren't true or we feel deeply aren't true. That doesn't work very well. So it is a bit of does require a little bit of artfulness and skillfulness to find the words and the language that allow you to focus on what's true, but in a more constructive and productive and supportive way, right? So when I was broke, for instance, let's say you have no money, it's hard to say I'm rich and I'm a millionaire. It's hard, especially if you focus on money. But you can say I'm rich in ways that money can't purchase or buy, right? I'm rich in ways that are perfectly priceless. Creativity, my health, running water, my friends and family, the love and connection that I have, my desire to be happy, all those things are perfectly priceless. And in fact, if somebody came along and said, can I buy those things from you? You'd say, I'm not going to do it, right? So there's a way of telling the story to yourself and others where you're not just, these days we call it positive or toxic positivity, but the idea is you don't want it to be a snow job. Sometimes you can reach for something that feels a little more unrealistic, sure. But you want to make sure that you're focused on a better feeling, not just better thinking, but a better feeling conversation with yourself and others.
And that leads into principle 6, which is the principle of constructive response to adversity, recognizing the advantages to be found in difficulty. When you're talking about being broke and then realizing you have the sun and the moon and the stars and enough food to have and water to drink. And also if you're broke, but you're not owing $1 million to other people, then you're better. But either way, principle 6, the construction of a response to adversity that also includes the appreciative thought and language is how I would connect those.
Absolutely, Ivan. Very well said. The challenging thing about adversity, and sometimes I call adversity contrast. Thank you very much, Abraham Hicks. When I was really struggling in my life, I picked that up from them. And the interesting thing about it is that, first of all, when you're in it, it's extraordinarily difficult to find your center, to find any joy. And sometimes that can feel like too tall and ambitious an order. But what you do know for sure, what we all know for sure, even when we're in the midst of adversity, is that adversity or contrast forces you to stop, slow down, and prioritize or reprioritize what's truly and who's truly important in your life. That's just critical. It really does help you regain perspective on life, and you stop majoring in minor things and minoring in major things, so to speak. So with that particular law, you're reminded that it's the contrast of life that makes life so beautiful, that the sweet is that much sweeter because of the sour. And when you're forced to go without, to slow down, to go with less than what you think you need or you want, whatever it is, whether it's a loved one or it's money or it's health, you come to realize what's truly important. And you also tend to find that includes your relationships. So all of a sudden, the weak relationships are weeded out and the strong relationships are strengthened. And that's extraordinarily clarifying. It can be extraordinarily validating. At moments, it can be also alienating, confusing, and you can feel lonely as well. I want to take away from that. Another way of talking about this briefly is that it's what we call post-traumatic growth, right? So post-traumatic stress disorder gets a lot of, airplay, but post-traumatic growth is a real thing. And what that essentially means is that even if you experience the worst kind of adversity and you find that you are experiencing post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, even then, often many people, in fact, quite a few more people, lots more people, experience post-traumatic growth than experience PTSD, even if they also experience PTSD, right? So that means that you come out better somehow, not just bitter.
PTG.
PTG, that's right.
PTG.
That's right.
The seventh principle is the principle of inspired action.
So, folks, I know I did. I often felt like, okay, this happiness thing feels like it's mostly about what I think and what I say, And that's true. Happiness, we could describe, at least in the beginning of our journey, as a state of mind, so to speak, state of speaking, a way of speaking. It's also about action, right? It also means, we're physical for a reason. There's a reason to, and we have these bodies and, whatever level of capacity or functionality you have in your body, you want to enjoy it, if you can. And the challenge often becomes, well, how can I take the most inspired action possible? How can I, going back to that first principle, take the laziest but smartest action humanly possible? And the key there is to find that peace and that happiness and that joy and that love, find the inspiration first, so that you can take action out of either a place of desperation or from a place of inspiration, from a place of frustration or from a place of inspiration. And you'll find that if you take it from a place of desperation or frustration, things tend to get worse. You might accomplish and achieve and acquire a whole lot, but it doesn't seem like you've made a whole lot of progress with this subjective quality of experience that you're after, happiness or peace or love. And you can say, wow, how can I spend decades working so hard at something and feel like I'm not any further ahead? We all know people like this. We probably are people like this to a large extent. It's like, look at how many things you have now that not very long ago you prayed to have. That if someone took away today, you would just pray and beg to have back. And yet, notice how all this achievement and acquisition, accumulation, and it hasn't really made most of us very much or at all happier at all, right? So again, it's about, coming back to realizing that there's a smarter, lazier approach to getting what you ultimately want. And that includes taking action, but taking inspired action instead of desperate and needy, greedy action. So instead of taking action from a place of unhappiness, where you're hoping that whatever action you take is going to make you happy, you take action from a place of increasing happiness. And then whatever you do adds to your happiness. So another way of saying that is, whatever you achieve, accomplish, or acquire only has the ability to magnify what is already there. If you're unhappy and you take action from that place, it's going to magnify your unhappiness. If you are happy and you take action from that place, whatever you achieve, accomplish, or acquire can enhance the happiness, but it's not going to, fill you up inside.
You're reaching for a positive feeling before you act within a framework of return on smart energy investment and a focus on not attaching yourself to it, but focusing on the positive, focusing it from appreciative thought and language and appreciating self, putting yourself up there such that when you take that action, it's inspired action because there's so much freedom and power behind it.
You nailed it. You couldn't have said it more concise there beautifully. I mean, it's one of your sweet spots. It really is. One of your sweet spots is summarizing things in a way that's very concise and succinct. And you absolutely nailed it. That's precisely the idea.
Now, the eighth principle, first of all, thank you. The eighth principle is the principle of self-empowerment in relationships. And I can see how this kind of ties it all together and then gets you ready for your second book of Love from the Inside Out. But tell me, when you came up with the eighth principle, what you were thinking.
Yeah. Relationships are hard. Relationships are really hard. Okay. There was a movie I'd watched called The 36 Chambers. And it was basically a martial arts movie. You may have seen it. And the 36 Chamber is like the ultimate, greatest sort of task or level you can reach. And that's relationships, and it doesn't mean only romantic relationships. My goodness, no, it also means platonic ones and professional ones and familial ones and all of that. And so the idea here is now let's take all of these incredible tools, some people might call them weapons, and let's go into relationships with ourselves first and foremost, with our friends and our families and our romantic partners. Let's go into all of that with an eye, an intention, and commitment to applying them and applying them consistently, and applying them consistently, not only, the rest of the book says, to get results. If you focus on getting results, that's a sure way to not get the results you want. If you focus on this step right here and now, and you focus on enjoy this step here and now, being fully present in this step here and now, and just making this moment that's usually a means to some other moment or a means to some other end, the end itself. It's like imagining this is the last moment you have left in your life. You just make it that. So every time you have that conversation with whomever, including yourself, you want to put into practice all of the other 7 principles. If you do that consistently, you'll find that, first of all, you're enjoying your relationship so much more. Second of all, you're way more attractive, okay? And you're especially more attractive to people that are also happy or wanting to be happy. You might not be as attractive to people that are insecure or people that don't like to be happy, okay? But also, and so you improve who you attract, you become more attractive, literally and figuratively. You experience and improve the entire relationship itself and your enjoyment of that, but you also improve the results of all of that as well. Now, it's no guarantee that the person you're with, just because you apply all this, is going to want to stay with you or that you're going to want to stay with them. But that's not the point. The point is happiness, not to be stuck in a relationship just for relationship's sake. So yeah, that's what that final chapter is ultimately about.
Can you imagine if happiness was taught to young people in school?
I just love the idea so much, Ivan. I see them experimenting with that in different places, and I'm looking forward to seeing a whole lot of that, a whole lot more of that.
Well, I envision it. I can see a class in happiness, in the conversations that surround happiness, that empower happiness, that bring about happiness. And obviously, I believe conversation should be taught. That's why I'm founding Conversations Academy, Conversations University down the road. And there's a whole list. In fact, I did an episode called 23 Classes That Should Be in College. And 23 is not even, I had a list of 83, but you could keep going. But when I think about like the core things, how to have conversations with people and how to be happy, like if I was taught those, if other people were taught those, imagine we have many more people with the technology of being effective in conversations while also be happy in the conversation, such that there's the principle of self-empowerment that leads to the principle of everyone empowerment, that we're using appreciative thought and language, that we're positively focused, that we're all looking out for each other in terms of, I want to make sure, Rob, that you're getting a good return, a smart return on your energy investment. If I hear you being not fully appreciative, then I'm like, hey, what can I do? What space can I be to support that? So anyway, I've got some visions. I'm terrified by my visions too, of like, well, if I get attached to them, if I just say, yeah, I'm the possibility of those, we are all the possibility of those, yeah, then I can flow with it.
Oh, that's so good. So I love that you're doing this work. Gosh, I feel you in the 83. I'm inspired that you made the list. I remember so many times in my head having a list, but never wrote it down. The conversations ones especially. I mean, I'm just really excited about that and looking forward to spreading the word on that. And you're right. There's an opportunity for us all to learn how to have these conversations with ourselves and others and how to be happy. And the beautiful thing about happiness and the beautiful thing about life is while you can't change the past, it doesn't seem like you can always influence the future very much sometimes. You're like, oh, what can I do? You can always enjoy and experience what you want to enjoy and experience here in this moment right now. That's all that's ever in our hands is the present moment. And the opportunity is to take more advantage of the present moment and to dive more deeply into the present moment at every turn, right? And so that I think is, and the other thing I'll say is this, and while I am 100% in agreement with you about wishing that these things were taught in, well, at the earliest age possible, and they can be, I'm also deeply grateful that it wasn't for one reason, which is without those, if I had had that conversation or I was taught that at an early age, or both of us were, we probably wouldn't be in conversation right now. And I can't imagine my life being any different. Like there's something about not having had it that makes me so much more deeply appreciative for you, Ivan, and for all the phenomenal other authors that I've read over the course of my life, the ones that I continue to read, for the work that I do now, for my clients. Like it, came with some suffering, and there's definitely a smarter energy investment there that could have come earlier. But I am very grateful, if for no other reason, that it's allowed me for us to become, introduced to each other, for us to be in conversation, and for us to be friends. So know that I am so grateful for you.
Thank you. As we begin to wrap up this conversation, what would you like to say at this point in time so that you can be complete?
Um, Nothing needs to be said to be complete. You're right. And I will say this anyway, which is one of the most challenging parts of this journey for me, and I can't speak for you, Ivan, was that I felt like my unhappiness was, and you can call it anything, stress, anxiety, my suffering, my frustration. I felt that it was justified and legitimate and valid. And for that reason, I felt that, and I was attached to it. I almost had an identity in it. And that made it very difficult to let go of. When I came to recognize and realize that I can be justified and legitimate and valid in my unhappiness and my suffering, but that I wasn't doing anything other than messing up my own life, my own present moment, and my future life, it became a whole lot easier to let go of it, right? When you suddenly realize, what am I getting out of this again? This frustration and unhappiness. Oh, wait, I can be justified in what I'm feeling, and yet I can still choose to feel something differently because I want to feel better and because I want to do better. So I think that's the main thing I'd like to share is that whatever you're out there feeling, doesn't matter what it is, you're justified and legitimate and it's valid to feel it. And you're allowed, you're welcome. In fact, life is so free. You can choose to continue to suffer and exist in your unhappiness. You can. And I don't want to for a second take that away from anyone if they want to hold on to it. And that being said, there's a huge invitation here that there is a life waiting for you that's so much happier and more blissful and more loving and more joyful and more self-loving that from your current perspective and place of standing, you can't possibly imagine how good that life is. I guarantee it. You can't possibly imagine. So that's just the invitation, the encouragement, maybe a strong recommendation to let go of whatever it is that you think is causing your unhappiness, because at the end of the day, it's just a thought, and a thought can be dropped.
I accept your recommendation, your invitation, and also the part of it of I'm going to continually let go of in order to accept. Like that's unfortunately part of it, or fortunately, depending on how you think about it.
Oh, so good. Oh, I love it. Mission accepted. It's great. It's great. Ivan.
My closing statement is this episode is complete. Like I really feel complete about going through the 8 principles with you, and really through them, like not just listing off, but getting through them. And having said that, you can be complete, but not finished. And I think this conversation, this episode's complete, but part of me wishes I could just knock on your door and then we go walk on the beach and we walk from Miami to Key West. And I believe that if we did that, we would not run out of things to talk about going there and coming back. And so in closing, this is just the beginning of a beautiful friendship. And like we have a long walk to do and a lot of work to do. Dean of conversations, dean of happiness. And there's a lot of good we can do. And it comes from dark places for both of us. Like times when we were not happy with ourselves, and whether or not we were justified in feeling that way, knowing what I know about you, we felt that way. Mm-hmm. And so I just want to encourage anybody who's hearing our words right now to be in conversation with us, no matter how tough life appears to you right now. You're living it, you're alive, and let us know how we can be of service to you.
Oh, so good, Ivan. Love that. And by the way, I'm up for the knock on the door and the walk along the beach. Anytime, brother, you let me know. I'm always in.
Last month, I was there. I was so close. I was in Boca.
No. Oh, the next time we'll do it
next time. Well, Robert, saying thank you is not sufficient. I'm grateful and have you as a part, and everybody out there too, as a part of this conversation about conversations.
Thank you. I appreciate you so much.
All right. We jammed.
Amazing. Ivan, you're so good at this. You're so talented at it, brother. I mean this. You really, when you talk about mastering conversation, you really do a phenomenal, like you've really mastered your craft. I mean, really, really.
Another thing I almost said, which by the way, we're still recording. So maybe I am saying, I kind of judged Tim Ferriss and Joe Rogan for having these super long episodes. Like, who wants to listen to a 2, 3, 4-hour episode? But having had this conversation, and we just didn't prepare for that, I could see how maybe doing 10 episodes a year, but they are the 3-hour episodes with the right person and the right background and topic. So
yes, Ivan, and especially I think with you, because you ask, first of all, you're so well prepared. Oh my gosh. There's that. Second of all, the way in which you connect, and you do this wonderful thing where you're able to guide the conversation in a very organic way. You have your intention set, but you guide it in a way that feels natural and organic, which in itself is very difficult to do, especially with people like me. We get on here, we want to talk about 29,000 different things. You do such a great job of that. And it is almost like, it's like you're steering, but it's hidden. It's like, how are we? So yes, I agree. Those long conversations can be so powerful and so profound with the right host and the right guest. Yes, 100%.